Would you rather have it between you and Dave once?
Hello.
Good evening. You're on the speaker and we're just getting set to open up the board meeting.
Oh, that's great. Hey, Karen, let's take you.
Yep. Might be live.
Blanky?
Joe, come on, you got me a blankie? Oh,
You know what
that's really nice. Because once my body temperature gets down below the temperature it's supposed to be, I don't get warm for like a month. So I'm gonna put this blankie on right now.
Unknown number.
Sweet.
No, pass.
Oh, thanks, man.
You guys take care of it.
Thank you.
The rest of us would have just rusty struggle.
Right. I'm surprised you told me you didn't rather sell it after.
Okay, we'll call this meeting of the Menonomonie School Board to order. Meeting has been properly noticed. This time, Janet, would you please take roll?
Chris Freeman,
Here.
Mark Dillman, Ronnie Huseby. Here. Clint Moses,
Here.
Carl Palmer,
Here.
Amy Riddle Swanson. Here. Charlie Schneider,
Here.
Angie Skillings.
Here.
David Steiner.
Here. Thank you. We have a quorum to conduct business. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
School district of the Menonomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. Move on to item D, agenda order approval revision. Seeing none, move on to recommendations and conversations. We have none for tonight. Next is highlight on youth. We have the River Heights Elementary.
So, President Steyer, Principal Mike Kennedy is here. They do have a virtual presentation that Janet will play here in a second. Mr. Kennedy, is there anything that you wanted to say before or after the presentation?
That makes sense.
Board Member Palmer is on top of it.
So all I'd like to say is, we just wanted to highlight what it's like to try to build community during a pandemic. It's one of the most challenging things to do when people have to be separate. How do you come together? So we just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you.
job. I'm sure a little hard to see in the back, but it was very good, so.
And it is available on the public portion of the board docs website. I know board members already received it as well. Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. At this time, we have our student representatives here, so Grace and Logan, take it away. What's your mic is on?
I'm Grace Hasse, student body president at Menonomonie High School.
I'm Logan McCoy, student body vice president at Menonomonie High School. So a lot's been going on, but we're going to start with some club announcements from the past few weeks. First up is DECA. On December 2nd, 34 DECA students traveled to Green Bay for the Sports and Entertainment Marketing Field Trip. The trip consisted of hearing from marketing directors for the Packers and Rush Center, as well as tours of Lambeau Field, Packers Hall of Fame, and the Rush Center. Students were able to get an inside look at various careers related to sports marketing. It was a great trip for all students. Along with this, on December 15th, DECA is hosting our annual Mr. Menonomonie contest. A group of 11 juniors and seniors will be competing for the title of Mr. Menonomonie with the help of our varsity dance team. 100% of all proceeds will be donated to charity. The event is on December 15th at 7 p.m. in the high school auditorium if you are interested in attending.
The science department has been working on a Sand County Foundation pollinator habitat grant. Me and Carissa Bruner, along with Mr. McMahon and Richard Green, wrote a grant to restore the prairie land behind the high school, and we actually received it, so we'll be looking forward to planting those native flowers and other plants to get that area looking to how it's supposed to be.
Science Olympiad has also had 2 tournaments this year and are looking forward to improving individually and as a team as the year progresses.
The Menonomonie FFA had another successful corn drive this year. The members have been holding a corn drive for over 65 years. This year, the agriculture community was very supportive, and the students presented stepping stones with a check for $7,200. The FFA would also like to thank Wisconsin Credit Union for providing care packages for each of the local farmers.
MHS students have enjoyed their break and are looking forward to the holiday season. After that, everyone will gear towards finals, and then after that, cabin fever week. Events this week at the high school include a band concert tonight at 7 at the high school, boys basketball against Sparta tomorrow at 7 at home, and at home on Friday against North at 7. Girls basketball at Memorial tomorrow at 7, and wrestling against North away on Thursday. That's all we have. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
I do have one question.
Angie.
Is the field behind the high school the old football field down below the hill?
It's like that area down below that near like the creek. So you have like the creek and then that area next to it.
Okay.
So like right before the football field
Like
area.
on the, keep going
Okay.
towards the wastewater.
And we use a lot of soil of that for our athletic field on top. So we're trying to like bring the soil back and have it be like a pollinator habitat.
Very nice.
Chris.
Yeah, that's pretty inspirational because we've been trying, some student groups have been trying to do the same thing at the Stout campus. And you have succeeded where we have failed.
We're
So
partnering with you guys.
wait a
We're
second.
using your greenhouse.
If you could bring this restoration from your campus and transfer it to ours, I think this would be a great partnership to see how these 2 institutions can work together.
Because a part of the grant was like seeing how wide we could spread it, and we're using some of the Stout students for the greenhouse. And I don't know is Richard Green close with the Stout? Have you heard of him before?
Yeah.
He's the like other main person of it, so he's in charge of it.
Well, is it okay if I just don't follow up on that? It's just really nice, especially bringing back the pollinators and trying to get a vision for what a healthy, vibrant kind of campus looks like. So I just really am so pleased about this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we're just looking to get it going for future generations, and that
Yeah.
science classes can use it for their research projects.
That's
So
what
we're
I'm
pretty
talking
excited
about.
about it, yeah.
Way to go.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. Okay, moving on to community communications. I did receive two, the district did by email. I will, Janet summarized them, so I'm just going to read the summaries. From Monica Barrier, happy to see that the district-wide COVID-related exclusions have actually been looking pretty good since coming back from Thanksgiving break, hoping the trend continues. And from Abe Smith, suggested implementing a multi-layered mitigation policy that is automatically triggered by community spread and hospital availability. Collaborate with local hospitals to distribute medical information on paper to every family in the district. I've also received two community communications. We'll do those in just a second. The comments of the people in the school district in the Menonomonie area are encouraged and appreciated by the board and the administrators. Education is a partnership with the schools, parents, and taxpayers all being important participants. This is a time to air concerns and express your opinion on issues. There should be no negative personal attacks against any individuals, including staff, board members, or administrators. At this time, I'll call up each individual. You have up to 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and the municipality where you're from. Our first will be Josie Pillman, and on deck, Lucy Rudenberg.
Hi.
The light is on. It's on.
No.
Yeah, okay. Now it is. My name is Josie Pillman. I live in Knapp, which is within the Menonomonie School District. Members of the school board and Dr. Zajdowski, thank you for allowing me to make public comment. I'm concerned about the present gender policy plan. It is unhealthy and destructive to the unit family. Human sexuality is designed to procreate the human race. In order to do this in a healthy, productive way, certain moral boundaries have been laid down. It takes character, discipline, and self-control to keep our young people within these boundaries. If they are violated, for example, with recreating with the Marriage Act outside of marriage, the individuals involved will be damaged and we will have unstable families. We will also have an unstable community in which to raise our precious children. Children need to be raised in a home with a man and a woman in a committed marriage relationship. This does not happen naturally. It takes intentionality to educate our children to stay between those rails. But the result will be much happier and healthier homes. The present gender policy seeks to destroy the individual so that they will not be able to form healthy family units. It could damage them for the rest of their lives. We need educators and students of character to teach and encourage one another to do the right thing. You as a school board will be discussing hiring new educators and personnel. I wonder if you can help Dr. Zajdowski to vet these new people. We don't just want academic experts. We want people of moral character with integrity and the courage to educate our students to be citizens with high moral standards. May your courage be contagious. Respectfully, Josie.
Thank you. Lucy?
At the last meeting, we were told that masks would become optional for all students as of today. I understand that was the policy the board adopted at the beginning of the school year, but later rescinded. And because even in the absence of any scientific evidence, some people persist in believing that masks confer some sort of benefit, I expect the pressure to keep masks mandatory to resume. Please do not give in to this pressure. Now that we are past day 600 of 15 days to slow the spread, there is no excuse for anyone to be ignorant of the facts. The most important fact is that healthy children are not at risk of death or serious injury from COVID. The average child is more likely to die in a traffic accident on the way to school than to die from COVID. It should be unnecessary for me to point out that cloth or disposable masks do not stop the spread of viruses. All of you know this, and the reason I know you know is that when you buy a mask at any retail establishment, There's a disclaimer right on the package stating that the mask will not prevent the wearer from catching or spreading viruses. Masks are not just inconvenient, uncomfortable, and unattractive, they are also ineffective. Anyone who believed that we could get rid of COVID by allowing our government to run roughshod over our rights, destroy our economy, and frighten our kids half to death was living in fantasy land. The virus is here to stay, and we need to learn to live with it. We could begin by accepting the good news that COVID is nowhere near as deadly or as indiscriminate as grandstanding politicians tried to tell us it was. The demographic groups who are genuinely at risk from the virus are easily identifiable, and there are common sense ways to protect them. Safe and effective treatments exist for those who get the virus, which will probably be all of us sooner or later. For now, everyone who is not in a high-risk group should be allowed to return to normal life. It's time to put mask mandates where they belong, in the trash with all of the used masks.
Thank you. That concludes our communications for tonight. Our next item on the agenda is letter I, revenue and expense reports for the month ending November 2021. Dr. Zalewski.
As I shared with the board this afternoon, unfortunately, the theater is not able to be here tonight. Leah did point out that the reports are very consistent with what we've seen in recent months. But if there are any questions that board members have, you're welcome to email me and we will give an answer to you within a day. Any questions you want me to note tonight? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to letter J, monthly employment report. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. I'd ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Amy? On the agenda, consent agenda tonight, we have the minutes from our board meeting of November 8th, 2021. We have financial reports that the board approved general fund checks in the amount of $1,943,356.47 and cash receipts in the amount of $122,239.53 for the month of November 2021 as presented. Donations exceeding $1,000 for the month of November are $5,000 for the Mentor Partnership Grant from Mayo Foundation, $3,400 to Menonomonie High School from the 3M Foundation Grant, and $1,000 to the Menonomonie High School FFA for jackets for the FFA students from the American Endowment Foundation. And finally, certification of school day safety drills as presented from NAP, Wakanda, and River Heights Elementary. Any questions? Okay, Janet, let's vote. You able to hear okay, Tanya?
Yeah, can I do it verbally?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I agree.
Okay, thank you. Okay, motion passes by unanimous vote of 8-0. Moving on to the personnel consent agenda. Ask for a motion to approve. Charlie, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Angie? We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just one question, I'm not familiar, what does Mr. Bundy teach?
He's a business and marketing teacher at Menonomonie Middle School.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, let's vote. Jen?
Janet, can I show my approval?
Yes.
Okay.
Your voting yes then, Tanya?
Excuse me?
You're voting yes then?
Yes, I did, sorry. Yes,
Okay.
I thought I said that, but sorry. Yes, Dave, yes, I approve.
Thank you. Okay, motion passes 8-0 by unanimous vote. Moving on to the action agenda, the first item is approved minutes from our special meeting from November 22nd, 2021. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Angie, is there a second?
I'll second.
Tanya? Any discussion? Okay, let's go ahead and vote.
Janet, yes, I approve.
Thanks, Tanya.
Yep.
Motion passes 7-0 to 1 with one abstention by Christian. Okay, we'll move on to item 4B. Excuse me. New course, approve new course proposals for 2022, 2023. Is there a motion to approve? Clint, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Angie, thank you. We did discuss this a bunch at our last meeting, but Dr. Zagowski?
Yes, the board reviewed the details at the last school board meeting. It includes the approval of Leadership 1, which is a health elective, and then also special education classroom assistants.
Any discussion? Okay, Janet, let's vote.
Janet, I approve, yes.
Thank you. Motion passes by unanimous vote 8-0. Action item 4C, incentive for special education paraeducators. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Charlie, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Angie? We have a motion and a second. Dr. Zagowski?
Mrs. White put together a nice summary of what this entails, but essentially it incentivizes our paraeducator substitutes to obtain licensure from the Department of Public Instruction. Licensure is not necessarily needed to serve as a para substitute, but it does help the school district, one, to make sure that that person is highly qualified, and then two, we are then able to charge the expenses for that substitute and receive categorical aid through the special education funding that we have. So, we've looked at this. It would also be a benefit for our subs, and the sub pool is quite small. I think we're all aware of that. So this can help us recruit and retain, and then also be a financial incentive for the employee and for the school district. We think it's a win-win. So we are recommending the approval of this incentive.
Does everybody understand?
What does that entail? Is it, they have to do courses, take a test?
It really depends on what the qualifications are that person may need. You need a high school diploma, and then to be highly qualified, you have to have some additional training. An associate's degree, I think I listed them out. Sam, do you want to maybe go through that real quick?
I guess the underlying of that question is the money meant to attract someone who's already doing the things they need to do to get that, and they just haven't taken that step? Or is it to cover the costs of obtaining whatever you're gonna tell us now?
It's a little bit of both, Carl.
So in order to be considered highly qualified as a paraeducator, you have to have either the 48 credits or an associate's degree, or you can take a test. There are several tests that can be taken as well in order to be considered highly qualified. With regard to the license, however, it's simply $100, and then we sign off on the application, and they are able to obtain a license. So it is in our best interest to do this, just as Carl mentioned, to kind of to attract our paraeducator substitutes and make sure that they are licensed.
Most of the paraeducators that we have hired are highly qualified. So really, for most of our paraeducators, it's just a matter of helping to cover the licensing fee.
Clint?
I'm gonna direct this question, Sam, it's kind of related, or it should be related. Are you experiencing any delays with the state with Department of License and Regulation at all right now? Or maybe you haven't experienced this yet?
Nothing out of the ordinary. We're used to 6 to 8 weeks. That's what they tell us. I mean, that's what they put on their website. That's what they tell us verbally. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. The one thing that they've added recently, that the DPI has added recently, that's kind of nice, is they on the website, they tell us where they are.
Status.
Yeah, the status of the application. So if you applied in May and they're working on those applications, you know that yours should be coming up soon. They should be approving it or contacting you for more information.
So you haven't really noticed much of a change recently, because other professions definitely have, like 3 to 4 times what's normal.
Okay, I'm not noticing anything out of the ordinary, but like I said, we're used to that 6 to 8 weeks.
Amy?
Joe, you sent me really nice emails. I questioned what the requirements were for a Pareducator, and I don't know if you want to send it to the rest of the board, but I thought it was very well done.
Thank you. I think Sam just covered it all,
Okay.
but,
Okay.
yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Charlie?
So this is only for substitute paras?
Correct.
So we're gonna help them to get their license. Is there any requirement that they substitute for us for a certain amount of time or anything like that? I do see that it says probably be paid for within just a few days. But other than that, will there be any requirements? And will there be a requirement in the future that the new substitutes have to have this license? Or will this be an ongoing thing that will continue?
At the last sentence of the second paragraph there, Charlie, I know there's a lot to absorb here. It talks about the bonus to be paid to the paraeducation substitute upon completing 10 days of subbing as a para within the district. So we do encourage all of our subs to get this license, but especially the ones that are going to be here for more than a day or two. It really makes sense. Thank you.
Will it be ongoing? Will we require this? Or next year, are we going to have this bonus as well for someone coming in? Or will we require them to have the certification coming in?
I want to stop short of saying that we would require someone to have it, because in some cases, we simply need people.
Right.
And if having the license means that we don't have another adult in the classroom, that's a problem. So we would prefer to try to incentivize it and see how that does first. And Sam will continue to keep track of it. I could see this as something that we would want to continue past this year.
Okay.
I just mentioned that substitutes work at an at-will capacity, which means that even though there are employees, they work when they want to. And so the incentive probably makes more sense than a requirement.
And so approving this as written, if we approve it, it would be indefinite unless it came back to the board to retract it for future years?
Correct. It's not a pilot and it's not limited to this school year only. However, it'd be likely to see something like this in the next employee handbook update.
Clint?
That was kind of my question too, is there's no sunset to this at all, it's just open-ended?
Correct. But the board does review the employee handbook annually. So if this is something that the board would like to remove, it could be done at any time. I can't see a reason now, because if anything, we're hoping that special education funding will continue to increase. And as that funding increases, it provides us as a district more and more incentive to have our subs licensed.
The district does get reimbursed more if they're licensed, correct, Joe?
Yeah, it's 29.84%. When you look at how many subs we actually have, that really starts adding up.
Yeah. Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Janet, let's vote.
Janet, I vote yes for this.
Thanks, Tanya. Motion passes unanimously, 8-0. Last action item, item 4D, high school van driver supervisory aid position hours increase. Dr. Zadowski? I'm sorry. A motion to approve, please. Amy, is there a second? Chris, second? Dr. Zadowski.
Well, this is really good news. We have more students obtaining employment outside the school district at different times of the day. The challenge is with this transition program and with a lot of these students, transportation is a huge barrier for them to be able to have these learning opportunities and these transition activities that are so important to their education. So between Tony and Sam, they've reviewed this and are recommending the increase from 1 hour a day to 3 hours a day.
I fully support it. I'm just kind of wondering why this is even coming before the board. It seems pretty operational. It seems something that could be dealt with within administration.
I appreciate that, Clint. Typically, if we expand positions, we bring them to the board for approval. We do bring the staffing plan to the board once a year, and then if we adjust that staffing plan by adding FTE, even though this is a very small amount, we think it's important that the board is aware. But if the board would like to provide us the opportunity.
We can hold on, that's
okay. Thank you. Glad you support it.
Any other, Charlie?
Just out of curiosity, how far are they going?
How many miles?
Or where to outside the district?
It's within like the Menonomonie area, within the city limits.
I don't know if you heard that, Tanya, within the Menonomonie area city limits.
Also, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, let's vote.
Janet, I vote yes for the increase of hours for the high school van driver.
Okay, and that motion passes 8-0 by unanimous vote. Moving on to the discussion portion of the agenda, our first discussion item is strategic planning targets for SDMA student achievement. Dr. Zadowski?
Yeah, and actually I'm going to turn this over to Brian quickly, but we continue to work on strategic planning goals. And one of the items that we were to do this year was to look at our student achievement and look at the baseline measures. And certainly the pandemic has impacted a lot of our strategic planning, but I appreciate the work Brian's done to move forward on this. So Brian, if you want to take it away and explain what the recommendation is, that'd be great.
You bet. So I'm not going to rehash all the achievement levels because I've spoken to the board at previous meetings about that. And we do continue to make progress in the area of English language arts and math. In the strategic plan, our initial goal that was set back in ahead of the 2019-2020 school year had a goal that we would increase proficiency levels at each of our levels, elementary, middle, and high school, by a total of 5%, with an increase annually of 1% using a 3-year rolling average. Because of the pandemic, it was decided, and I appreciate the board's direction that was given to us to take a look at our baselines and make some adjustments where needed. So the document that's included in board docs is just simply a stating of what we are utilizing as our current baselines at this point moving forward for English language arts and math at each of those levels, what the current 3-year rolling average of that would be, and then what the new target goal if we were to increase by 5%. At this point in time, we're recommending that target be moved out to 2024 versus 2023 because we do have 1 year without state level assessments that was in the mix. And our strategic plan goes through the 2023-24 school year. And again, we do continue to make gains in those areas. And I think with these baseline levels, and when we take a look at what our spring assessment results will be this spring, I think it's going to give us a really good idea as to where we're at as far as being on target for those goals. So I'm happy to answer any questions at this time that the board may have.
If you don't mind, Dave, before questions, I do want to point out when we looked at this strategic planning, we certainly didn't know that the pandemic was gonna be here. I think we all understand that. We also know how interrupted learning was in the spring of 2020. And then last school year, we know that learning was interrupted. We were very hopeful that we wouldn't have so much interruption this year. And I really appreciate all the work that our principals and teachers and families have done. But as you know, there's been a number of students that have missed school this year with the COVID pandemic still going on. So I think Brian's work on this makes sense. It's really gonna be interesting to see how things shape up and what the new normal is going to be. But based on the number of school days that kids have missed, I really think that these goals are aggressive yet attainable by our students and staff.
I have one question, Brian. It says on the bottom, baselines are reviewed and updated during the 21-22 school year due to COVID-19 pandemic. So the baselines are lower than the 3-year average.
Yep.
And so the 3-year current rolling average is a pretty good bump from where the baseline is originated from. That baseline then is what year?
So the baseline is a combination of either the 2018-2019 school year or the 2020-21 school year. So the pre-pandemic assessment, in some cases, the percentage of students proficient was high, or excuse me, was lower, was low in some cases. At some of the levels, it was last spring's assessment. So we reviewed those averages or those baselines to determine where we were at, and then took a look at the most 3 recent state assessments as far as proficiency. So that's that 2-year rolling average. So the baseline may not necessarily be representative of the same academic year. It simply is the lowest out of the last 2 state assessments that we have.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Other questions for Brian?
Yep. So I get the idea of moving up to 2024. I don't have a concern with that. How will we be measuring success in the 2023 if we're moving that? You're just saying we're adjusting this, so we'll still have comparables?
Yeah.
Okay.
Each school year, when we review the strategic plan goals, deliverables at the end, we have been coming back and we have a scorecard that we report on each of the areas. We have not had an achievement scorecard report the last 2 times we've done that because of not having the state assessment data to put in there and knowing that we were going to be reviewing this information as part of this process. So we still will report on that annually each year leading up to that.
So would the 2022 and then the 2023 goals essentially be splitting the distance you're listing in the last column? Say each year we're gonna, so if it's 2.55, we split that into 2 more measurements and we're looking for that much, not even 1%, but each of these.
That could be
a fair way to do it?
Yeah, that could be one way to do it. What we intended to do was to report on the 3-year rolling average each year. So we pick up a year and we drop a year, report that proficiency level. Because we'll have some years where we might have a very large increase and some years where we might have a larger decrease. So to even out those peaks and valleys, rolling that 3-year average, and that matches what the state does with the state report cards as well.
Okay, any other, Charlie?
Given the big gap between middle school and math, do you foresee changing your tactics there?
So we are, the short answer is that remains to be seen. We are conducting a program review in both math and English language arts. The middle school for both math and English language arts have some of the highest proficiency levels that we have. So what we do see traditionally is the more proficient or the higher percentage of students we have proficient, the more challenging it is to increase at that point. One of the things that we have observed at middle school specific to math is we have some grade levels where traditionally year after year, we have a much higher proficiency level than other grade levels. So we are taking a look at what are some of the things that we are seeing that may cause that lower proficiency level. for a number of years. 8th grade math, as I previously reported, is an area that we've been consistently below the state average. This last state report card, as well as state assessment, we were above that state average, so we're seeing that shift. Traditionally, we see higher percentage of proficiency in 6th grade, then a little bit lower in 7th grade, and then we tend to, and the state observes this as well, a pretty substantial drop off in 8th grade. So we are taking a look at, what we might be seeing there, and are there some things that we need to do to address that? And we'll continue to do that as part of that program review process.
You're still offering the Algebra 1 option in 8th grade?
We have a very small number of students that do that. Currently, what we're finding is we tend to see larger gaps present if a student misses either 6th or 7th grade instruction. There has been in math what is referred to as slowing the pace to get to Algebra 1. Definitely still appropriate for some students. And since we have scaled back the number of students that are taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade, we have started to see some gains in that 8th grade proficiency level as well.
I would think it'd be the opposite. Chris?
I guess I had a couple of questions about progress. And I'm a little dubious as to why we aren't being clear on where the baseline is coming from. And I get that you want to pick the lowest of those scores. And I'm not sure if that really demonstrates a good understanding of how achievement is improving by picking the lower of 2 scores to be a baseline, just because it's lower. There might be other factors that we want to think about in terms of how you decide what your baseline is. And then I get where you're going, that where you're really looking at is your 3-year rolling average, because that's a much more predictable way of understanding what that improvement looks like. So if the goal was to make about a 1% improvement over each year for those 3-year rolling averages, then I just have to notice that the outcomes seem to be not meeting that standard that we have put out there to begin with. So I almost look at the 3-year rolling average as being the baseline we want to be looking at. Accounting for all the problems we've had with COVID and this school, that would seem like a better baseline to be using in terms of what we're looking like for our targets are in 2024. So it would seem, this is a suggestion, that the goal was to be making 1% gains in that rolling average. Then we would want to see those goals for 2024 being a little bit higher than they currently are. And it seems to me that maybe some of the difference in that is created by offering a baseline that maybe isn't a true baseline, just looking at the lowest of all possible scores for each of those particular testing outcomes. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, I think I understand what you're asking.
So with that, I mean, I imagine that we saw really nice gains this year and that we're going to see those keep on realizing themselves as we go forward. But would you at all think about adjusting those 2024 goals in relationship to what the established desire was, which is 1% gains, given the baseline that we have over the next 3 years, so 2022, 2023, 2024, would that make sense?
I'm not sure if this is.
No, it's just establishing what our goals are for our outcomes based on what our achievement levels are, and that's what we put into our.
And I understand that, Chris, but I don't think pinning Brian down to it when the decision was made by the team together is, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe.
Well, the original goal of the strategic plan was 5% over the life of the plan. And if I'm hearing you right, Chris, and that was approved by the board, that goal. But again, the pandemic threw a wrench into all this. Are you suggesting that we maybe just kind of forget about the first 2 years of the strategic plan, set the baseline goals, and then look for a overall 3% gain in the next 3 years?
Given the last 3-year average, yeah, that would be a much more predictable way of, and that would still achieve the goals that we decided. The plan was, I believe if I looked at the reading it correctly, was that we were looking to create a 5% gain, but a 1% increase per year. So that would be achieving what our goal was and putting a much better understanding of the baseline that's not based on an arbitrary selection of what the lowest test scores were, but really going with the 3-year rolling average, which is a really nice baseline, which of course is what we do with the state plan. And it's in the ballpark. I was just suggesting that maybe that would be a more predictable way to achieve what our original plan was, which was ostensibly to try to come up with 1% gains each year.
You know, I think that's something that we could talk about with the lead team and bring this back. It makes sense to me. I guess I want to think about what unintended consequences there could be and how it relates to the intent of the original plan. It got all screwed up because we were supposed to set baselines right away in 2020, and then the pandemic messed it all up. But so I think finding a reasonable way to get the accountability outcomes that the board wants makes a lot of sense. So whether, you know, and what you're saying makes sense too. So we'll talk about it with the lead team, and at our next board meeting, we can bring it back.
So I just want to clarify that I'm understanding what he's asking. So when I'm looking at this, the baseline levels that are on your graph weren't established initially. So I've only just been here a few months, half a year. So these aren't the ones that you guys have always been using. It was just something that we pulled in for this report.
The plan was to make baselines in the spring of 2020, Brian, is that correct?
Yes.
And then
But-
we didn't have an
Right.
assessment from the state, so we couldn't.
Right.
So these were pulled in from the reports that we just got done reviewing. Okay.
But I don't disagree, Chris, with what you're saying. I just, how we go about it is all, so thank you. Any other questions?
One simple math question, because it's late in the day. When we say 1% increase, we're talking about an actual increase versus a relative increase. In other words, 1% means 35 to 36, not a 3% relative increase.
Correct.
Okay.
That is how we've interpreted it up to this point.
Okay.
To me, this is refreshing as a district to be talking about this.
Yeah, it really is.
Any other questions for Brian?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next discussion item will be to review the 2021-2022 budget revisions. Dr. Zadowski.
And again, Leah is not here, but she did put together the budget revisions for the board to review. In January, Leah will be here when this comes back to the board. You can see that, this is a normal operation for the board. Most of the budget revisions have to deal with site-based revisions, moving dollars from one category to the next. She listed them pretty good in there, and she is making the recommendations that the board forward these to the next meeting for approval. So I guess what I would suggest is that if you go through these and you have any specific questions that aren't answered in Leah's report, please go ahead and email me, and we will have those answers included in the background for the next meeting.
So if there's no objection, we'll bring these back next month at the next meeting for approval. Okay, item C, environmental site report.
And Brian, you're still there, that's good. Go ahead and take it away, please.
All right, well, thank you. And I'm happy to be here tonight to give just a quick update on the environmental site. You've heard me provide some updates across the last couple of years of many of the things that are going on out at the site. A couple of highlights that I just want to point out for the environmental site really over the last school year. This past summer, we completed our maintenance department completed maintenance on the remaining camper cabins out there, getting those cleaned up, restained, re-roofed, and buttoned up so that they'll last us for many more years. We did some equipment maintenance out there. I'm really excited about the curriculum enhancements that we made out at the site or for use out at the site. As part of summer school, we piloted an environmental art class out at the site that was extremely well received. And my understanding is the plan is to bring that back this next school year and possibly look at a class to offer opposite of that in one of the subsequent sessions. Our K-5 environmental education curriculum team came together and put together an updated common curriculum for staff to use for environmental education, not just out at the site, but also back at the schools as a complement to our K-5 science curriculum. Also integrates literacy and social studies into those lessons as well. And this fall, with back to school, we were able to host all of our K-5 classroom teachers on site for professional development on that updated environmental site curriculum or environmental education curriculum. The other big update that we have during the pandemic, as many of you have heard, a lot of lumber mills in the area had shut down for various reasons. And then we know that the cost of lumber products then subsequently went up. We had been talking about doing a logging sale or timber sale out at the site for about a year and a half. And due to some of the mill shutdowns, there just simply wasn't demand for a period of time for loggers to conduct timber sales and harvest. We're at the point where we're ready to go out to bid. So included in the background is a map of our environmental site, or a portion of our environmental site, where we're planning to do some logging. In one area, or actually it belongs to 3 different areas, but it's one stand in the map, consists of about 21 acres. It is a thinning that will take place. Where there will be a select cut, go through and remove some of the trees in those areas. And then we have another stand, one that goes right along the entrance road, and then one that is a little further into the property. That's primarily red pine. There is some white pine in there as well. But primarily red pine that is reaching the end of its useful life. And we're at a point where we're going to do a clear cut. At that point, I'm excited about this project for lots of reasons. One, it's a revenue generator, and will help offset some of the cost of future projects out at the site. But whenever we do a project like this, it gives us an opportunity to involve our students in both the replanting that takes place, as well as seeing the way in which the regrowth happens out at the site as well. So we're already having conversations with the forester about how to engage our students in some of the replanting that will take place in some of the clear cut areas, as well as how we'll utilize the areas where we've done, or where we're going to do the thinning, to help explain and expose our students to forest regeneration out at the site. Really, what typically ends up happening for those who haven't been on the board, when we've gone through a timber sale, it'll go out to bid, and then it usually takes about a 2-winter process for us to go through the harvest and wrapping that up. So just a handful of updates related to the site.
I just want to applaud Brian and our teachers for the work on the K-5 environmental education curriculum. That is a huge deal. When I came here almost 8 years ago, the environmental site is terrific, but we had a lot of sporadic use. Some classrooms would use it quite a bit, some classrooms won't use it at all. And we kind of saw with our environmental science curriculum across the board, some classrooms, it would be a very high priority, some classrooms it wasn't much of a priority. And really depending on which classroom a child was in, they could have a much different experience in terms of their involvement with environmental education. So we got the teachers together, Brian did a good job, and now we have really, it still provides flexibility for those champion teachers who really want to take it another step, but it also provides kind of a baseline level of what the expectations are related to environmental education in grades kindergarten all the way up through grade 5. So to have some consistency and then also have the opportunity for all of our students to get out to the site at certain points, I think is a real positive step for our school district, and I think it's something we can really be proud of.
You still doing some of the campouts at night?
Yeah, so Joe talked about, with some staff, we want to take it further. It's not something that's required, but we do, depending on the year, depending on the classroom, both pre-pandemic and so far this school year, we have had some camp outs that, yes.
It's over 40 years ago when I went with Downsville, and all 4 of our kids went through Downsville out there, camped out.
And our cross-country team utilizes it as a preseason team building experience as well, so it's not just limited to classroom.
Nice. Any questions?
I have a really nice spot. I put my little tent out there 4 years in a row. I've been rained on twice out of 4 years.
On top of the hill, or?
No, I like the bottom because there's more cover. One question, during the harvest process, does that impact student usability? Is there a lot of lumber trucks going in and out, and are we locked out of, and I support the whole thing, but I'm just curious.
No, that's a great question. So there's minimal impact on student use because the bulk of it will happen during the winter after freeze up. We do have some sites that utilize, or some classrooms that will utilize the site during the winter, but it is pretty limited out there. And, that is one area that I'm very aware of as far as trying to time that. And honestly, with this sale, because it's right along the main entrance road, that is a piece that we always watch it closely, but, obviously we're going to want to monitor that piece. And it's probably one of the closer harvests to the main cabin area than we've had in recent history at the site, so, yeah.
Okay, any other questions?
Dave, we should point out too that the land acquisition that we've talked about in terms of securing a small parcel of land near the entrance road, we are going to be having that special meeting of electors on January 10th because we do need elector approval to make that purchase, and that will secure that entrance road portion into the future. So we were going to have it tonight, but we wanted to make sure that proper posting and everything, all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, so that will be on January 10th.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on. Final discussion item D, number of regular and special education spaces available.
Tonya, go ahead and give us a lowdown on this one.
All right, so this is the annual open enrollment seats available. As you can see, I gave you a copy of that report. This is me attempting to predict enrollment for next school year. The reason we do it now is open enrollment for next school year opens up February 7th. So we need to have this report prepared prior to open enrollment opening for next school year. I use a couple different formulas. I do use caseload factoring. It is kind of an old, I don't even know how long ago DPI kind of came out with that, but I think it's a good way to look at students and look at their IEP and their disability and how much service they get to say what is their caseload factoring number. So a student isn't identified as one student. Depending on their needs, if they have higher needs, they might be considered more like a 1.7 or a 2.1 student. So then I go through that. Some of our students, some of our classrooms that have more significant needs, it is really based on the number of students that are in that classroom. And that is also on the same document of the caseload factory that DPI came up with a number of years ago. As you can see, our enrollment for special ed students has increased over the past, I think, 5 years. So my predictions for next year is that it would continue to increase. So what I am basically saying is for open enrollment purposes, if a student is identified with special needs, we do not necessarily have seats available for them for next school year. Any questions?
Amy?
And that's for open enrollment.
Open
Does that
enrollment.
include students that are in the district?
No, this is for open enrollment purposes only.
And that's the whole point, Amy. We want to make sure that the students who are in our district, that we're able to provide services for all those students. And because of the high numbers, we don't feel like it's fair to say that we can bring more students with special needs in at this point.
I knew that, but I just wanted the public to understand that.
I know that you did.
Yep.
Andy?
And looking at some of these numbers, are we looking at adding more staff in this area? Because some of your numbers, You have higher,
So that hasn't been decided yet, because as enrollment changes on a daily basis within our district. So right now, I'm just looking at a prediction of for open enrollment purposes. So I will continue to look at this, as Joe knows, I continue to look at that as it gets closer to us talking about staffing. Hopefully, we'll have a more firm understanding of what that looks like. Again, we have to do this document now because open enrollment opens on February 7th. But yes, I use this, part of this is what I use to determine whether I need additional staffing, whether it is teachers, whether it is additional paraeducators, or service providers like speech and language, or I use similar things when we had increased that in the past.
And we have, over the last several years, added a number of special education staff. And I would anticipate when we get to the staffing, when we talk about that usually in March, for the following school year, the way things are looking, it's probably gonna be another area that needs to be considered.
so just so that I'm understanding this, for example, the middle school cross-categorical teachers, you have in there the factoring number of 205, and then you have maximum caseload with 6 teachers is 156.
Yep.
So there's not actually 205 students,
Nope.
but that's,
That's the caseload factoring number, and that is the current students, and then I have to predict how many students would potentially, I move 5th graders over, I move 8th graders to the high school, and then I predict new enrollments based on that there's been new enrollments there. So currently, right now, that caseload factoring isn't, right now, if I would do it for the students at the middle school, it is not 205.
okay,
It is predicting what it will be next school year.
okay.
Do you have any idea, Tony, how much our student population has just increased over the last 5 years?
I have that number down because we do a count, we do an October 1st count, it's a special ed count. So I have all of those October counts probably for the last 10 years. And I can maybe do that in a Friday update for you.
Okay.
Yep.
It seems like a lot.
Yeah, and I
Yes,
know in your annual report, you often cover the numbers as well.
Yep.
We have had a lot of new students.
Yep.
So you had, newish, trying to understand everything. You said more than likely we wouldn't accept any. So does the way this works is once you finish this process by February, that line is drawn in the sand?
It is drawn in the
Okay.
sand. Yep.
So it's a firm. And then I'm thinking about in my other life, how hospitals work. One nurse takes care of 6 patients, let's say.
Yep.
And if you have 4 patients, you have some capacity, but you're not gonna hire a nurse to just take 2 patients. So just for the sake of, are we missing any opportunity? Does having additional students help us get the resources we need in the next discussion? As opposed to saying are we leaving ourselves working overstretched because we draw the line versus saying, let's take some more, now we can justify new hires. Do you see what I'm saying?
I don't know if we would need to bring new people in to justify new hires. Because I think,
Yeah, 'cause
Yeah.
considering that we've been adding staff each of these years, I think, I know what you're saying, Carl, that makes sense. But the mobility of the student population though, that would be a real risk, I think.
Because the caseload numbers, I don't understand those very well, right?
Yeah.
Like, so if we're 30 over on caseload, is that a big deal? Is that a little deal, right? And is the line to hire someone 100 over the, that's type of math, you're probably very familiar with how it would play out.
Okay, any other questions? Thanks, Sonia. The final discussion item, review items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. We have no second meeting in December. School ends on the 22nd of December for winter break. December 24th is a deadline for incumbents, which would be myself, Clint, and Chris, to submit paperwork for 2022 election. And they've asked, especially Janet, if we could turn those in before school, what date, on the,
3 o'clock on the 22nd.
3 o'clock on the 22nd, so that Janet doesn't have to spend Christmas Eve. in the office would be appreciated. I think you have the forms here tonight.
Yep, if anybody wants a form, you can grab them.
Okay. And then, January 4th is the deadline for candidates to file nomination paperwork for the 2022 spring election, so I appreciate everybody to keep that in mind.
And that's by 5 o'clock, right? 5 p.m.
Okay, with that, we do have closed session tonight. We'll take about a 5-minute break and then we will reconvene for closed session.